Hi, good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Matters of Public Importance, right here on Channel 6. I'm yours, Gail Teixeira, Parliamentary Chief Whip for the People's Progressive Party Civic and for the People's Progressive Party. And so I'm very happy to be here with you this afternoon. On this program, we shall, as always, focus on matters of public importance, bringing you information and discussions on issues and matters of concern to you, the Guyanese public, every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30, right here on Channel 6. And before we get into the meat of the program, let me remind you of the telephone number, notice number, you can use to call in when we start taking calls a little after 1 o'clock, and that is 225-0010. That's the only line that's working here. And so let me repeat, don't use the other line because you won't get through. 225-0010. And as I always remind you that the office to lead the opposition is open. We are at 304 Church Street between New Garden and Peter Rose Street. Queenstown, we're facing the border cricket ground, so it's easy to pick us up. We have a big sign and the Guyana flag. And we're open from Monday to Friday from 9 to 5:30, and then on Saturdays from 9:30 to 1:30. So you're free to come and drop in and visit and to ask for assistance or to get guidance or just to have someone who will listen to your issues. The telephone number that you can use to call ahead, particularly those who are coming from out of town, 225-3432 is our switchboard line, and so you can call in there to talk to someone and to get advice on what to do. And of course, the Mirror newspaper is available online now at www.facebook.com/Weekend Mirror News. One word, Weekend Mirror News. For the last few weeks, we've focused on the economy for the last few programs, and this week we're going to shift and go to the November 12th local government elections. Before we get to that, just let me give you a little idea of what's going on in Parliament, and that is that yesterday was the last sitting before the recess. We're going to recess from August 10th to October 10th. And of course, we put about 5 oral questions without notice. All were rejected by the Speaker. We put an adjournment motion on crime, and that was debated. Myself and Mr. Rohi spoke for our side on our profound concerns with the crime levels in Guyana, and of course Minister Ramdutan was the only speaker on their side. And so, as usual, for the government, they say the statistics show that crime is declining. And so this was a debate that took place. Our concern is the impact on people's lives, on the issue of having public safety and trust in the police force, in the judicial system, in all the various rule of law issues that will protect us as Guyanese. Of course, Minister Ramdutan referred to us as using scorched earth tactics to undermine the government. The unfortunate thing is that every day you open the newspaper, there are people who are being robbed and attacked and beaten, stabbed, shot at by criminals. And of course, I raised in the motion I brought to Parliament about the alarming number of women who are victims of crime, either in terms of being permanently maimed, in many cases injured, and others being murdered, and the increase of rape of women and children, and abuse of children. Of course, for the minister, these issues, government seems to think that they're doing a good job, and so we call on the government to urgently and effectively manage the public security sector as they're morally and politically obligated to do on behalf of the people, regardless who is the government and who voted for them. However, the minister kind of made some of the arguments we made, treated them, as if they weren't important. So, what is that? Is that unusual for this government? Anyway, so we brought those, and then we saw the government proceed to give Mid-Atlantic company that has that Exxon has bought major shares in or major partnership in, as well as Total, another oil company. So with a lot of tax concessions, income tax, property tax, etc. So that we asked for the government to defer this so we could look at the agreements in greater detail and to be able to have a better examination of the concessions being given However, that was denied by the government and they proceeded and adopted it. So that's Parliament. We closed on that level. Of course, we are returning whenever the government calls it after October 10th, and we'll see what happens there. But let's get back to what's immediately in front of us, and that is local government elections. We spoke on July 5th about these elections on our program, and this was, of course, prior to the date that Minister Bulkan named November 12th. And in that program, we spoke about mischief afoot by the government with the local government elections, with the new local authorities, local authority areas, and the reduction of 16 constituencies from 14 existing local authorities. Now, because the system in 2016 was new, it's important for people to understand. Not all of Guyana votes in these elections. It's only in areas that are declared neighborhood democratic councils, or areas that are called municipalities. And those two, municipalities and local NDCs, are what is called local authorities, local authority areas by law. And what it means, in every NDC, every city, that it's divided into constituencies. So Georgetown has 15 constituencies. The city is divided into 15 constituencies, of which there'll be two sections of the ballot. One in which you would vote for the constituency candidate of your area. So if you're living in Alboystown and your candidate is X, the part of the ballot would have the names of the candidates who are vying for your vote as a constituency rep. That means you're voting for that name. The other part of the ballot would be for what's called the PR, proportional representation, and that would have listed names for each party, and you would vote for the party. So that's how the system will work. So for Georgetown, with 15 constituencies, you have 30 members of council. And that's how it goes across the country like that. Some NDCs that are small have 6 constituencies, therefore be 12. Some have 5 constituencies, therefore there be 10 people, 10 that would be voted in. What Minister Bulkan did was that he has created new local authority areas. So in the municipalities, you have a new one for Mahdia, for example. So what are the cities or municipalities of Guyana now? Georgetown, Anna Regina, for example, the Batica, you have Kriviton, Rose Hall, New Amsterdam, then you have Lethem, and you have Linden. So now you've added on a 10th one, and that is the one for Mahdia. They've also increased and included now 10 new neighborhood democratic councils, a number of them in, 3 of them in Region 2, for example, which are not populated areas. In fact, it is doubtful whether people know that they are going to be NDCs, and will have to pay taxes, of course. So Maruka, Phoenix, Kitty, Providence, and Nile Kosher are the 3 new ones for Region 2. Region 1 has no new local authority designated by the minister. And then you come to Region 4, where we are broadcasting from. You have Lamaha, Yarracabra, and Hararuni, Yarracabra. So these are 2 new NDCs on the Soesdijk Highway. Then if we go to Region 6, there are 2 new NDCs created. That's Pritanka, Cote Barat, and I may not be saying that last word correctly, Cote Barat, I think is another way it's said. And then you have Weiberg, Caracas. So 2 new NDCs in Region 6. And then in Region 8, as I pointed out, you have Mahdia, has been becoming a municipality when it wasn't even an NDC before. And then for Region 9, you have Aranaputa, Upper Buruburu, and you have Anai. And Anai includes 5, it's a large area including about 5 title villages. So what they did, so those are the new areas, new local authorities. But you also have, what they did was, in the existing local authorities, which went to the elections in 2016, they have taken 14, they've changed the constituencies in 14 local authorities and reduce the constituencies by 16 constituencies. So it means that, therefore, if an area had, for example, 10 constituencies and you've taken out 2, it means there's 8. So you're moving from maybe 20 people to what would be 16 people. Well, what happens to those 2 constituencies you've removed? You now have to absorb them into the same NDC, into other constituencies. Now, it's a very delicate and it's a very legal matter, and of course a political one, because you have to be careful. Now, the law says the constituencies, because the first past the post candidates, who are the constituency candidates who go in their own name as candidates, that the constituency have to be basically around the same size in terms of numbers of voters. So if you have 4,000 voters and you have 10 constituencies, then the number of voters should kind of average about 400, or between 350 to 450 in terms of the number of voters, so that you don't have a constituency candidate running who has 50 voters and another constituency candidate in the same NDC has to get 1,000 votes. So that's where the law says there must be some parity between the voting numbers in each constituency. Whilst Mr. Bulkan, as the minister, has the authority to create new local authorities and to name how many constituencies should be in each local authority, it is GCOM that will then go and define the boundaries. Now, this is where the issues become very delicate. If you have an area, for example, where PPP won, and that constituency is now dropped, you've dropped a constituency, therefore, what you're going to do with this number of voters? Are you going to absorb them, and where are you going to absorb them? And how are you going to do that? And so this becomes very delicate, and if it is misused and abused, it is called gerrymandering. And this is something that happens in various parts of the world to change the results at the elections without tampering with the election machinery on election day. So you remember that each week, June, July, we encourage you, all people, to get registered and to do their transfers during the continuous registration cycle that ended on July 8th. And so we kept saying, if we want to put Guyana back on a democratic, transformative trajectory, then we have to ensure that you, all of us, we vote in the local government elections. We vote and we monitor GCOM and the election processes before election day, on election day, and in the count, like hawks. That's what we kept saying, almost like a recurring decimal every week. And you have to remember all of this is in the context that the APNU AFC got slaughtered at the 2016 local government elections, with the PPP winning 65% of the local authorities, that is 28,000 votes more than the APNU. And the APNU didn't get the balance. The APNU had to share the balance of 48. We got 48 out of 71 local authorities. The balance was shared between APNU, AFC, and independents. So they didn't get all the balance to themselves. And you have to remember that a number of local authorities, the APNU did not contest at all. In further to that, they ended up having 6 tied local authorities, 1 municipality, that was Mabaroom, and 5 local NDCs. And you will remember that the minister, in violation of the law, appointed APNU chairs in all of the 6 tied local authorities. And we took the matter to the court, where it has still not been heard. And of course, we've discussed this several times after the local government elections in 2016 and further in 2017. Clearly, on the eve of the 2020 elections, APNU AFC will not want a repeat of the 2016 elections. So what are they going to do about it? Work hard to persuade people to vote for them, that they're the right choice? Spend some of the $267 billion plus in the 2018 budget to do roads or improve the conditions in these local authorities? You're not seeing much of that going on, and it's already August. So what are they going to do? So if they're not using the power of persuasion and the power of political persuasion and the power of money to be able to change people's lives, then what are they doing? What is clear now, especially after the debate in the National Assembly on June the 25th, on the Local Authorities Election Amendment Bill, that this government will do anything, including amending a law, while a matter is in court to cover their tracks. And this has to do, this particular amendment that they brought, there were several, but the key one had to do with the count if there is a tie. So this is after the GCOM finishes and says the seats are in a community are 6 for PPP, 6 for APNU, AFC. And they have to go now elect their chair and vice chairman or their mayor or deputy mayor. Most likely it would end up being a tie at that level. What they did is contrive to change the law, and of course passed it, that this will not take place anymore. The actual principal act says that where such a case occurs, you have to go to by-elections. You have to tell GCOM that the tie cannot be broken at the elections for the municipality, mayor or deputy mayor or chair and vice chairman of a NDC, and that you have to go back to GCOM and you have to have an election of by all the people in that area, in that NDC or municipality, for who would be the mayor and the deputy mayor. They've thrown that out completely and brought in a formula where the overseer, in the case of a local government authority, or the clerk, town clerk in the case of a municipality, will be the one that manages the elections, and a process that has to go through that will eventually lead to the clerk, if the tie cannot be broken, calculating the number of votes for the PR persons, and therefore the constituency persons are left out from the vote, and therefore trying to break the tie in that way. And of course, if that doesn't happen, then there is a recourse that the clerk or overseer would then go to a magistrate, a judge, and who would then put the names in a bag, and by lot pull who would be the winner. So they've changed the law completely. So let's just explain what that bill was about, because the government has a terrible habit of bringing bills and explaining to nobody what it is. And the problem is sometimes people don't know where to access these bills, and therefore the population is not included or informed. The ministers are very awkward, let's put it that way, to explain to the people exactly what they're doing in any kind of detail. It is also clear that when we've looked at the orders put out by the minister, that, as I said, that the inclusion of a new township, Madia, and 9 new local authorities, so that you have 3 in interior areas and riverine areas, 3 of these 9, while reducing the number of constituencies in 14 existing NDCs by 16, and these were won by the PPP, is now part of a grand plan to interfere in the local government elections and try to improve their APNU AFC lot at the 2018 elections, while simultaneously ensuring control of a number of key titled Amerindian villages. The reduction of 16 constituencies for the 14 existing local authorities, our NDCs, is classic gerrymandering to ensure the allocation of seats and votes in the PPP-1 areas are diminished. As I've repeatedly said on this program and elsewhere, that the Amerindian village councils are separate and distinct from these local authorities. They are another and separate layer of local governance provided for in law by the Amerindian Act. The Local Democratic Organ Act in 2006 was amended to remove any council of the any council established by the Amerindian Act from the local democratic organ. Therefore, it cannot be part of the local authorities. The minister made orders in June 2018 to provide to include titled Amerindian villages in what was calling the Anai local authority, which would have 5 titled villages with their land to become part of that. Arnaputa, which is not a titled area, has been created as an NDC, and basically it has 1 constituency, although they put in several constituencies where basically nobody lives. The one for Madia, this is the one that they created, I'll talk about in a little bit more. The issue, though, of course, is that some of these NDCs, the ones I read out for you for the different regions, like the ones in Region 2, are quite small, and therefore how will they be sustainable, especially when the president keeps saying to all these meetings he goes to that the local authorities, municipalities and neighborhood councils have to be self-reliant. They've got to be able to stand on their own, and this is all about decentralization, etc. But some of these areas cannot sustain themselves. Many of them cannot sustain themselves. The population is too small, the tax base is too small, and of course, people were never included or involved or consulted whether they wanted to be part of NDC or not. Because the law does provide that they have to be consulted. And yet all these NDCs, if we didn't say something in June, many of these people would never have known. The interior areas in Region 9 would never have known that they are part. Nor Mahdia, for example, although the minister kept saying it all the time. People assumed that Mahdia would not include the Amerindian villages that border Mahdia. How can you talk about democracy when you have not consulted populations about a fundamental change in life, which will include the fact that they are now under a different control, that they have to pay taxes, or they will be required at some point to pay taxes, and that the dynamics change from when you are a community that is not labeled as a local authority, you come directly under the government. When you're now as an NDC, there are certain things that are responsibility of the NDC, not the government. And how will you sustain that? And why would the government not have consulted the people involved at these community levels that this is the direction they want to go in, and to get their views, whether it's Amerindian, non-Amerindian? No public announcement either by the minister or the Department of Public Information to explain to the Guyanese people what actually happened in June. They haven't said a thing. So, as I said before, the government with one blow achieves two things. One, it controls new local authorities and reduces the number of constituencies in existing local authorities. And this is all to do with improving their results for them at the elections, because the intention is to reduce the PPP majority. And secondly, by imposing these local authorities over Amerindian titled villages, they intend to put a stranglehold on these Amerindian village councils. By doing this, they will impose within the Amerindian Village Council a super body in control of the area, which includes land, and where that body will be overriding their powers of governance, the Amerindian Village Council's governance, which is set out in law. This is a recipe for confusion, conflict, and at worst the dismantling gradually and by law of the Amerindian Act and even of the Constitution. We can go on and talk about the minister hasn't gazetted the boundaries for some of these new municipalities and local authorities as required to guide, in fact, the GCOM in the boundaries that exist. He's supposed to gazette this. Whether he's given it to GCOM or not, the point is these have not been gazetted. In fact, GCOM had to make a comment on July 18th that the role of GCOM is clear as prescribed by Section 38A5 of the Act. It states that the Election Commission may, by order, combine or subdivide one or more electoral divisions to form a constituency. That is, a group of voters in a specified area who elect a representative to a legislative body for the purposes of electing members of that local authority. And that's where I brought in the point about the issue of parity between constituencies, which GCOM has to be very aware of and be very careful of. But let's examine more about what this gerrymandering is and how it works. And let's take Region 6, for example. The Deputy Chief Scrutineer of the PPP in Region 6, Mr. Deroop, spoke about that there needed to be more consultation in the communities in that region, in the local authorities, with regards to adjusting the constituencies or the boundaries of the constituencies for the local government election. He said that as though so far GCOM has had only 2 consultations, one in the East Bank of Berbice and another in West Kanji area. He said GCOM is not giving enough information to the residents of Region 6. It wasn't even a consultation, it was just to bring information to the residents that they already decided on these NDCs to form these areas. In fact, Minister Bulkan signed off on it already, and they've already decided the boundaries of the various constituencies. And that was all they told the residents. So that they have divided between Bulkan setting up and reducing constituencies and between GCOM, who seem to be also subdividing and moving pieces of constituency around based on Bulkan's formulae, that the APNU AFC will benefit or should benefit based on this gerrymandering, to benefit by winning some of these communities or improving their votes, the number of votes they get overall. And Mr. Duroop went on to explain that in some of these areas, like in the new areas, that they merged these with other areas so that, and I'll just give this example, Kutbarat, Pritanka, NDC, they have made 2 constituencies, while the Highbury village, East Bank Berbice, was merged with Lighttown village, East Bank Berbice. What he's saying it is by joining that Highbury is known as a PPC stronghold, and by joining it with Lighttown village, the APNU AFC may stand to benefit there too. And so he goes on in that vein to give a number of specificities of areas where they have changed the boundaries of the constituencies, which may put the government in a better stand. And he goes on to point out, Mr. Rook goes on to point out that the APNU AFC coalition at the last local government elections won only one of 16 NDCs and 1 municipality out of 3 in Region 6. So they won only 1 of 16 NDCs and 1 municipality out of 3 in Region 6. Were they to go back in 2018 and do the same or worse, that is APNU AFC, then this would not look good for them, especially as they approach 2020 elections, especially when they're boasting to everybody that they're going to win back 2020 elections. By the amendments they've made, they have now created 18 NDCs in Region 6. And of course, the 3 municipalities, New Amsterdam, Rose Hall, and Skeldon. So they have a total now of 13 local authorities instead of what was before 19. And this will shift some of the balance of forces. He goes on again to point out areas of Ordnance Fortland area, which the PPC won by a huge majority. They're now merging with number 2 area, and the east and west side are being merged into one, and the number 2 area is very populated. So these are some, for those of you who may be listening, I'm not familiar with some of the numbers of these villages, and in my mind's eye I'm trying to locate them just visually. Again, he goes on to point out Pushlot Adventure area, where the PPC won 4 out of 7 constituencies. What they did is to reduce the 7 to 6, thinking that they may win 3 and we will win 3. So in other words, we go on. There are more and more of these examples that Mr. Duroop gives. And so clearly this is a particular plan and ploy of the government to try to improve their lot. If they can't get it by popular vote, let them get it by gerrymandering. And I had pointed out, let's go to Madhya, the new township in Region 8. Region 8 didn't have elections in 2016. There's no NDC and no local authority. But it goes on to point out that Madhya will now include 2 villages, Amerindian title villages, Mycobi and Campbelltown. The first village Mycobi has already formally indicated to the Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs that they do not want to be part of the township, and it's illegal. Campbelltown has made a similar decision, I understand, and will be indicating that to the Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs. So that's an important development, that Madhya now would include 2 title villages, and I already talked about Anai. So Anai would be a local authority that includes now a huge piece of land, including 5 title villages. So these are important issues for you to be aware of, and to know that in local authorities, where sometimes people think, it's not very important, we'll wait for general, that in these elections it's very important to make sure that the ploy and the plot of the government by changing around these local authority bodies, that we will defeat that too, like we did in 2016. And just to let you know, GCOM is spending $74 million on billboards, so people will be informed about matters relating to the elections. So they're creating, apparently, installing billboards, constructing and installing billboards for 26 neighborhood Democratic councils and 150 constituencies. And they have had bids, and that these were open in the National Tender Procurement Administration. And of course, the other development, which you've all heard about in the last few days, is that the AFC has decided to go it alone. So how will that work, guys? And of course, AFC is confident it's not dead. So that yesterday they had a press conference at Parliament in one of the other rooms to announce that and to respond to some of the people who have criticized this move, including some of those that are sympathetic to the government, such as David Hines and so on. David Hines had said on Sunday, that I believe it was Sunday or Monday, that the APNU got what it wanted from the AFC. And Mr. Trotman, the AFC leader, responded that, contrary to what the political analyst has posited, the AFC and the APNU have one principal rival, the People's Progressive Party. And he went on to say, I don't believe that the APNU is getting ready to kick us anyway. We work well. And columnists and analysts have been indicated that the AFC is dead. But this election is a great opportunity for us to prove otherwise. So in other words, what the APNU AFC, I believe this is by some kind of mutual agreement. I don't think this is, as some people have said, this is a sign of great disunity between APNU and AFC. I don't quite buy that. I think it is that the two of them, they have one common enemy, that's the People's Progressive Party Civic, and that therefore, what better way than to try to show that they are individual parties. And we know that APNU, the party in APNU is the PNC. And WP, Rupert, GAP, the Guyana Action Party, is Alicock. Does that party exist anymore? Keith Scott is a national something party, which 10 years ago only had 3 members in it, so doesn't count. What other party am I forgetting? Justice for All, which has Jai Paul, and I'm not sure what is how much votes Jai Paul got, or the Justice for All got in 2015. So, 2011, because in 2015 they were a coalition. So that the APNU coalition it's not a coalition, it's really the PNC. And has a coalition with the AFC. The other parties have no role in all of this. In fact, the APNU Council, which is supposed to be a meeting of all these parties together to make decisions, hasn't met for years. And so this is about AFC and PNC, basically. Don't fool yourself about no APNU. And so the PNC and the AFC have one common enemy, People's Progressive Party. And if they feel that by letting AFC go off on their own a bit and put some candidates out there, that this could help to undermine the People's Progressive Party in a number of areas. Unfortunately, I don't think the AFC realizes how profound the anger and distrust of AFC is, especially among PPP areas, PPP1 areas, that a number of the AFC people would not be welcome in terms of people supporting them. And so maybe this is a good lesson for the AFC to learn. They're the ones who are in a coalition that says they get 11% of the seats in the parliament. And this will maybe show how strong they really are. But really, and so we are not worried about what the AFC plans to do. And in fact, by their own confession, in the press conference, according to a newspaper report, Mr. Patterson and his colleagues, having declared the AFC an awesome elections machinery, quote, awesome elections machinery, Patterson and his colleagues brushed aside assertions that the AFC had been rejected by the coalition's main group, the PNCR, or the APNU as a whole, from having a seat at the table. And so I have no qualms in my mind that this is no indication, one, of a split, and that this is actually a mutually supportive arrangement between the two to go at elections separately. However, it's going to be very interesting. Having said that, we have seen in Parliament the AFC has no persona, no personality, no position of its own. It then goes and votes alongside with the PNC, the APNU, every time. The first chink was last week with the FIU for duty-free concessions of 2,000 cc for 2 staff members of the FIU. And basically, it wasn't a split where AFC split off and didn't support. It was that Jordan walked out during the vote. He was very unsupportive of what Dr. Norton had brought from the committee. Mr. Williams was not at the time in the vote, nor was Ms. Ferguson. And then you had Gaskin, Ramjatan, and Greenwich voting abstain. So that Greenwich is not AFC. And so this was not an AFC splitting off. In fact, Moses Nagamutu voted for it, even though Ramjatan didn't vote for it and Gaskin didn't vote for it. And those are AFC. But Mr. Trotman voted for it, and he's AFC. So this is not this was a different issue. What the AFC has said, which is also interesting, is that they will not contest all constituencies. Now, we know why. They can't. AFC does not have the capacity to run candidates in all the 81, 82 local authorities. They just don't have it. We know that. And so, but they said they will have a presence in all 10 regions, and they are going to select areas in each of the 10 regions, select local authorities and constituencies in those local authorities, which they will deliberately run. But they will not be fielding candidates all over the place. What will be interesting is in any election campaign, you get on the platform and you say what you do better than someone else before you. Well, how do you do it in areas where, APNU won? Is AFC going to run a candidate in an area where APNU won? So then it has to criticize APNU. And that's why I'm saying that AFC will be selecting PPP areas where PPP won to be able to try to reduce the vote of the PPP. So you have a two-pronged approach by the government and with the complicity of the AFC to play along with this plot. And so the People's Progressive Party had put out a press response on August the 5th. And here's what it says. The announcement that AFC, will contest the upcoming local government elections separate from APNU is part of this ploy. Again, the intent can be gleaned from its public statement in which it indicated that it will not contest in all of the local authority areas. The trickery is that they will come into certain PPP strongholds in which APNU will not and cannot contest, like a Trojan horse, pretending to be independent of the APNU in order to garner some sympathy votes in those areas. That they think they can pull off such clumsy stunts is illustrative of the lack of respect which they have for the intelligence of the Guyanese electorate. And so we are not fooled by this approach by APNU AFC to try to undermine the elections. And so 2018 is going to be 2018 local government elections, a dress rehearsal from many different angles. A dress rehearsal from the point of view of a GCOM machinery. How is the GCOM machinery working? And is it working freely and fairly? Is there any indication of interference? Any problem with the list? What's the staff going to behave like? Are we going to have the problems, as we've had almost all the time, in many areas where the GCOM staff are prejudicial, they're biased, they're uncooperative, in what is going on? Or will we have professionals and people of integrity manning the polling stations who are GCOM staff? So that's one area of a dress rehearsal, to test the machinery before 2020 and to test the list. It's also a dress rehearsal for the political parties, that is the PPC and the APNU and AFC. Because a bad showing at 2018 could hurt their hopes in 2020 elections. That is why both the APNU and AFC are desperate to interfere with the boundaries and the constituencies to ensure they will do better in 2018. So they can wipe, what they call egg off their face. So they're hoping to wipe egg off their face so they don't have to even live with that the PPP got 65% of the votes in the 71 local authorities. And we have to make a pledge to ourselves that we want Guyana to be put back on a democratic, transformative trajectory. Then we have to ensure they were registered on the voters list. We vote and we monitor GCOM and the entire process to election day, on election day, and that we check and we look at them like hawks at every process. The 2018 local government elections, we the people must show our strength again, and let APNU AFC know that they're not wanted. We did it in the March 2016, and that was a mere 10 months after the APNU AFC got into government, when they said they had won by 4,500 votes. And at those 2016 March elections, we won, as I said, 65% of the local government elections. And we must do this again in November 12, 2018, and then, of course, again in 2020 general regional elections. It is only when the PPC is in government that this country moves forward and progresses. So when we look at the local authorities, this is, for many people, it's not as important as general elections. In these local authorities, they're very important. One, in terms of the big picture issues, the issues of the challenges at the macro level. What is the plan? What is the government trying to do? Whilst it's talked about self-reliance and villages and NDCs must manage their own resources, etc., many of these areas cannot sustain this. Look at Georgetown. Georgetown rakes in a lot more money than any other local authority in the entire country, yet it never has enough money, even assuming that there's not issues of corruption and abuse within the Georgetown municipality. But it just doesn't have enough money to do all the work that was required for the city. And so these elections are important from the terms of, as I said, the big pictures. And I think it's time in Georgetown that we get a change. It's a time for, we have 15 constituencies, it's time for Georgetown. How we've had GGG, PNC, GGG, PNC, GGG. Never had a PPP in charge of Georgetown. Think about it. But certainly, we've certainly had, for years and decades actually, not just from the 94 local government elections, the PNC has always been in charge of Georgetown from the time of independence. And so they've been at it for quite a while. Then GGG came in and GGG became back PNC, that's Hamilton Green. And now you have, after local government elections in 2016, you have again the APNU AFC combination, where they're just two PPP councillors, two PPPC councillors, and one independent. And that's it. That's it. And so it's time for a change in Georgetown too. It's time that, just as they came to people in the interior and different places, the PPP's been there for so long, time for a change. Georgetown needs to have a new set of leaders running the city that can actually make a difference. And so think about it, my dear friends. Let's take a call coming in. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
I think you people have a responsibility to tell this nation, give this nation a true picture of the development during the PPP. Let them know that the drug on the wall fueled the economy at that time. Let them know that. I remember right away the MV Danielson. That was swept under the carpet. Let people know how much drugs came into this country during that period. But y'all boast about all the time. Good.
Thank you. I'll wait for some other callers. You know, I find it always interesting that there are persons who feel that they can come up with all the old things the PNC have said, which have never been proved. Just like they said in the 2015 election that we had stolen $30 billion per annum from the government coffers. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on audits and forensic audits and cannot find anything, cannot trace anything, don't know anything. And with an economy that is about $60 billion a year, an economy, and we were stealing $30 billion a year, how was it that this country was moving forward? How was it that Guyana had 8 years of positive growth from 2008 to 2015? How was that? If all this $30 billion per annum, according to Dr. Clive Thomas and the SARA and the PNC in the 2015 elections, $30 billion a year, do you know how much money that is? And so we can hear that about the underworld fueling the economy. And I think you need to do some research of your own and stop mouthing what you've been told to say, because sugar, rice, bauxite, gold, in that period were doing extraordinarily well. And so the improvement in 2008 to 2015 had nothing to do, as you're claiming, because MV Danielson and all that is in those years, not in the 1990s. And so it is good to sometimes stop and think and analyze. I like to deal with facts, and if you can show me that in that period the economy was dependent on drugs, I'd be willing to look at those figures. But there are no such figures. It is all talk, and it is all slander, and it's just to create an environment where you can attack the PPP. But you know what the ordinary people of this country are saying? That whether they like the PPP or not, whether they voted for the PPP or not, that this country did better, and they themselves, in their personal life, did better. You answer that one. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
Hi, Comrade Gail, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thank you for your wonderful program.
Oh, thank you.
I want the Republic to know that non-PPP minister are never charged with drugs like this present government one. Secondly, they can make how much municipality and town and I establish they want. PPP going to trash their skin and they can't even hide their head in Parliament to face the PPP. Good? Coming this 12 November election, right? And the laws that they make present now manipulate the law to suit themselves. The turn back will harm them and sit in the opposition bench 2020. Thanks.
Thank you very much. People are, you know what I love about politics, and I love about Guyana, and I love about Guyanese people, is that despite what happens, that I have faith in Guyanese people being able to see through things and to be able to analyze for themselves. In fact, this is a country that's very politically conscious, that is a population that's very politically astute, and they sometimes they are influenced, as in 2015 they were influenced to, with the rhetoric and time for a change, and the PP's been there for a long time, and let's bring some new guys in, and also the call for we first time and is our this time, and all those very, very emotional and psychologically manipulative rhetoric. But at the same time, Guyanese people are not foolish. They're very, very astute. And so within a matter of short time, the government, instead of taking the goodwill that they received, have actually squandered it. And so what they've done is betrayed the people, betrayed their own promises they made to them, and have worsened the conditions of life of our people. And so when they're talking about us removing $30 billion from the country's assets, we stole that, in other words, every year. Since the VAT has come along and the increased taxes, the 200 new taxes and licenses and fees and everything that people have to pay for, the government has removed from the purchasing power of the Guyanese people $10 billion from their own capacity to spend on what they want, to use it for what they want, and instead to put in taxes. By the end of that year, that figure will increase to $20 billion. So who's stealing from the Guyanese people? Who's taking from the Guyanese people? And so the man who called in, the gentleman who called in, the elections, local government elections, will be a decisive one. And the PPP is quite satisfied that the image and reputation of the AFC has gone down so badly. They've lost what political capital they have. They have showed no capacity to be a party, which is what they said they were going to be. They went to the public and said, we are joining this coalition and we're going to be the balancing act. We're going to be the ones that make sure that the old politics of the two big bad parties, PPP and PNC, will be the guys in between, making sure we will manage PNC so that some of the things of the past will not happen again. Well, a lot of what we're going through now happened before, for those of us who are old enough. We are seeing this reversal back to Burnham days. And the president himself has a great admiration for Burnham and the things that Burnham did and the reintroduction of things that Burnham did. The People's Militia, the Youth Corps, bringing back now, they're talking about national service or a version of that, right? We've seen all this. We've gone down this road before. And AFC has no capacity to withstand any of this. And those who are in government are enjoying themselves so much that they really don't want to give this up. Because if the APNU, the AFC, was such a principled party, and if it had stood by what it promised the Guyanese people in 2011 and 2015, it could not stomach to be part of such a coalition. But it has sold its soul. It has sold its soul as a party to be able to stay in government, get good salaries, get good benefits, and they're willing to compromise that for the people who voted for them. So we'll see what happens in 2018 elections. It'll be a very instructive elections on how the maturity of the Guyanese people, and I believe always in the maturity of the Guyanese people. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
Yes, good afternoon, ma'am. I'd like to address that first caller.
Yes.
Talk about drugs
Yes.
in the PPP regime.
Right.
If you look at the half-year report, the traditional sector has performed poorly, right? Sugar, bauxite, and so on. But that's where we get in the problem. So people just talking about drugs. Drugs is there in all countries, you know? But
Yeah.
drugs wasn't the main driving force during the PPP time. It was the traditional sectors that were performing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're getting some good comments here today. I remember in Parliament when we reported when the PNC was in opposition about the performance and the IMF Article 4 looking at improving Guyana being prudent fiscal management of the economy, and the fact that we were having good growth, the quality of life was improving of our people, and the PNC would sit on the other side and shout drugs, 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 and stuff like that. What's happening with drugs now? What's happening with drugs now? What is happening with the connection with drugs with this government, for example? What is the issue of corruption with this government? The level of corruption in this government is astronomical. Yesterday, just give me an example in Parliament. You know the public health sector is I cannot believe a sector that I used to manage, 92 to 97, has, in a short time, 1 billion between 2015 and now become the notoriety for corruption. And I'm embarrassed because I know many of the people who worked in that sector are not corrupt. And I know many of them have retired in the meantime, but there are a lot of the people that I know in that sector are not corrupt people. And yet in 3 years, the level of corruption in the Ministry of Health is setting bells and alarms off. And so, you know about the drug bond, when there are no drugs in, but we're paying $14 million a month rent. We've already paid over $200 million in rent to a building that is not being used. Then we went and outside of the tender requirements, purchased over $1 billion worth of drugs, including $600 million from Answer Macau, without going to tender. Then they went and bought another $366 million without going to tender from another company, which doesn't even bring in drugs. And so those questions were before the House. In addition to that, because of the shortage of drugs, because of the shortage of critical issues, and poor management of the health sector at every level, we have seen also an increase in what's called neonatal deaths. These are babies from the time they're born until they leave the hospital, or within the first week or so, because some of them may be too small and they have to stay in hospital for a month, 2 months sometimes. The number of neonatal deaths are babies who are born, who should live, but aren't. We've asked the minister earlier questions a few weeks ago. Of course, with them, everything's fine. But we have discovered that a lot of the deaths are related to particular contamination, which has to do with microbial contamination of the neonatal intensive care unit at the public hospital. It can be treated, it can be dealt with, but the government's general tendency when you raise issues is not want to hear it, or to disown everything you've said, throw it out, and continue merrily on. I know as a minister that many times I'd open the papers and read things of what people were saying about my sector that I was in charge of, and sometimes they were unfair criticism, but nevertheless, you have a responsibility to the public you serve that if something is going wrong, there's corruption or deaths and so on, you have to go and investigate it. You don't have to make an announcement you're going to investigate it, but you can go and you see it in the papers. People come and give you information. But this government just hard ears. They don't want to hear nothing because they think they're doing very well. Well, we need to teach them a lesson in November 12th, that the people of Ghana are not happy with them, and they don't want them there. And so they need to be, if they don't hear, when they read in the papers some of the letters, when they look at the Facebook and see some of the comments, when they go to Parliament and hear some of the views. But you know, they're not going out and meeting the people. And I remember I worked with all the presidents of the PPP, both as a minister and as a non-minister, as an advisor. And I know those meetings can be rough, even in PPP areas. People want to make their voices known. That's part of their democratic right. And to explain to themselves, and sometimes, so what if they cuss a minister or cuss a president? They want change, they want their lives to improve. And I've been at many meetings, including those which were PPP support areas, when our comments were rough, this is what is needed, and criticize the government. And you had to sit there and take it. Explain as best as you could, but you also had a moral duty to try to correct what were the weaknesses in the system. This government has a different approach. First of all, they don't want to go talk to the people at the community levels. And now we're getting reports of the interior, that they're flying into interior areas with chartered flights. One occasion to cut a ribbon for a bus, 7 chartered planes, costing over $2 million, to take in a huge entourage for the president, etc., etc., etc. And they landed there, they cut the ribbon, barely talk to the people, walk out and go. And in these villages, it is traditional that when a minister or even a president goes, they spend time with the people because you don't go in there often. But this is not the way the government runs things. Even in their own areas, which they won, people are complaining there that they're not coming in to see them, to talk to them. So they're afraid of the people. And we have to teach them that they're right to be afraid of the people. People don't want them anymore. Let me just go to one last call. I'm running out of time. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Matters of Public Importance.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Every time you look at the news, you only hear this government talking of born. I really like to know what born and look in this country. When I suffer the nation and this president, Mr. Granger and Nagamutu suffer this nation, and Sharma son dep on the ear every Saturday. When you call in this for the program, so long you talk bad about the PPP, you want to hear that. But if you talk the rights are going on in the country, you don't want to hear it. He cut you off the ear. It's Sharma son talking a bundle instead of stripping and talking instead of lie at the ear. And these people are not ashamed for the minister and the government all just promise. No business not serving in this country.
No.
I call him from the Sharma program and ask his son, what's going on in the region? He said people more nice these days. One to the poor people were selling on the street. Then I came for that. He said he was sending him money in the mall, so if city man have place for people go and vend inside, where they will go and vend.
Yeah.
Right? He said the people more nice, the country more nice more. So what will happen to the people in the street?
Exactly.
Everybody have to go in city mall or go in the big place and the fancy place and shop. Then I came for the poor people them.
Exactly.
The next one, Minister Brooms. She should be ashamed of herself. For go on the television and lie from the security guard, and the camera show everything back on the ear that everybody could see. And then she blast him out attacking Buxton. But this and that and the PP is the one who gives them the first hand in Buxton.
Exactly.
It's Church of God Road, where they had the PP government who give them.
Yes.
I hear they're talking about born and bring water into this country. Being born and then people have to line up for water and everything. They never get water. You just get some old sauce when they line up.
Yeah.
Line, but till morning till 9, 10 o'clock in the day. You want to earn them things. Now they get in their house now.
Right, thank you very much.
And this thing, what the PP government do for them? These people are not ashamed.
That's true. It's very true, and I'm very glad you called in.
Shame for short eye, Nagamutu.
Well,
He shame and drink him. He right to set him out and the Granger babe.
Exactly. Anyway, he's not going to have much time long more. 2020, he'll be out. So will Mr. Granger, and so will this government. But the gentleman calling in is referring to a number of things that are important, and the majority of people in this country recognize, as I said, that even those that didn't vote for us, that under the PPP time, they could catch their hand, they could see where they were going, and their lives were improving. And they want, in fact, more and more people want the PPP back in government to bring back change and improvement in their lives. This is reach a point where they now say, look, even though I like the PNC, I don't want the PNC to run this country. They can't run the country. And it's only when the PPP runs the country that their lives improve. And therefore, as we go towards the November election, we're going to talk more about these issues. And the young man that called in that talked about what conditions were like before 92, 94, in terms of access to a number of goods and water, for example. These were things that were brought in during the PPP time with great effort and we were bankrupt, remember, as a country. So we've talked a long time today, and I'm very, very pleased that so many of you called in, even though we only had one line working. I hope by next week the second line will be working. But there are important issues for us to talk about as we move forward. And so I hope that you have a blessed week in the week coming, and that on the weekend you stay safe, don't drink and drive, take care of yourselves and your families. And so let me close off by thanking you again, as always, for calling in. I really do enjoy hearing your views. And so let's remember, struggle we shall, and silent we shall not be. Silence is the greatest enemy to democracy. Silence makes those in power think they can get away with anything. Silence helps those who want more control and less democracy, those who want to move this country to a police state. And at the next elections, the people will make their votes count again, and there will be a PPPC government, and we shall have to start all over again as in 1992 to reconstruct, to put this economy back on a firm and stable footing, and restore the programs which help the poor and vulnerable and those at risk, and restore the independence of the judiciary and legislature from executive interference. So, thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll stay in touch. I'll be here next Thursday. Bye-bye. Take care.